The wind howled over the cliffs of Lindisfarne, a lonely island off the northeast coast of England. It was a sound the sisters of the monastery knew well, carrying the scent of salt and the promise of a storm. Inside, they knelt in prayer, their chants a steady rhythm against the flickering candlelight and the thunder that rattled the stone walls. Sister Ethel, young and devout, lifted her head. She felt an unease that went beyond the weather. "Mother Abbess," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the growing gale. "The sea roars like a warning." Abbess Hilda, a woman whose faith was as unshakable as the cliffs themselves, answered calmly, "When heaven tests us, we answer in faith." But the test that was coming was not from heaven. High in the watchtower, a lone monk peered into the churning gray mist. His heart leaped into his throat. At first they were just shapes, dark smudges against the horizon, but as they drew closer their forms became terrifyingly clear, long ships, slicing through the waves like phantom beasts, their prows carved into the snarling heads of dragons. The monk's cry shattered the sacred quiet. "Strangers from the sea, to arms, to arms!" The monastery bell began to toll, not the gentle call to vespers, but a frantic, desperate clang of danger. The peaceful routine of the holy island was broken forever. Panic bloomed like a dark flower. The sisters scrambled to save what they could: priceless illuminated manuscripts, sacred relics, and the heavy gilded cross from the chapel. The air, once filled with incense, now smelled of burning oil as torches were hastily lit against the encroaching darkness of the storm and the coming night. Then, a sound more terrible than any thunder. The splintering crash of the main gates. They burst open and the invaders poured in. They were like the sea itself, a chaotic, unstoppable tide of violence. Rainwater gleamed on their round shields and horned helmets. The sacred halls, built for quiet contemplation, echoed with the brutal clash of steel on steel and the guttural shouts of a foreign tongue. Through the chaos, Abbess Hilda stepped forward. She was an old woman, frail in body but immense in spirit. Holding the blessed cross high, her voice rang out with divine authority. "This is the house of God, you defile holy ground." The raiders paused for a half-second, surprised by her defiance, but their leader only laughed, a harsh, barking sound, and answered with a shout in his own language. The spell was broken. The sisters huddled together, their world of prayer and peace collapsing around them. Priceless books were torn from shelves, their sacred pages scattered and trampled underfoot. The air filled with cries of fear, replacing the hymns of praise. Still the abbess stood her ground, a lone pillar of faith against a storm of men. Sister Ethel knelt beside her, tears streaming down her face. "They will destroy everything," she sobbed. Abbess Hilda placed a trembling hand on her shoulder. "They cannot destroy what we believe," she said, her voice a bedrock of certainty. When the terrible noise finally faded, the monastery was a ruin. Smoke billowed from the smoldering roof, and the sea crashed against the rocks below like a drum of mourning. The next morning, a handful of survivors gathered on the desolate shore, watching the dragon ships vanish back into the fog. Sister Ethel was among them, her simple habit torn and stained with ash. As she clutched the chapel's cross, one of the invaders, a young man with pale, haunted eyes, lingered behind. He looked from the smoldering ruins to the cross in her hands. In a quiet, halting voice he asked, "Why didn't you run?" She met his gaze. Her own eyes filled not with hatred, but with a profound and sorrowful strength. "Because faith does not run." He stared at her, a long, searching look, as if her answer was a language he was only just beginning to understand. He turned to leave, but hesitated. "Your God is strong," he murmured. Ethel's voice was soft, but clear, and merciful. The young warrior paused again. "Then may he forgive what we have done." And with that he was gone, disappearing into the mist to rejoin his ship. As he left, Ethel's strength gave way, and she sank to her knees on the cold, wet sand. Abbess Hilda came to her side. "They came for gold," the abbess said softly, looking at the devastation. "But what they took was peace." Ethel looked up, her eyes blazing with a new fire through her tears. Then we will build peace again. Her words became a testament, a prayer for both the lives that were lost and the souls of those who had taken them. Years passed. The sea grew calm, and Lindisfarne was restored. But the memory of that night, the scars on the island's soul, never fully faded. Pilgrims who visited the rebuilt monastery would hear the story, told in hushed whispers by the sisters. They said that when the Northmen came, the sisters did not scream. They sang. Their voices rose against the storm and the savagery, a shield of harmony against the swords, turning terror into a defiant act of faith. They said the invaders themselves faltered, caught in the unearthly sound, for a moment unsure if they had conquered a place of worship or been conquered by its spirit. One day a group of travelers arrived from the northern lands. They were not raiders. They brought offerings of intricately carved wood, not stolen gold, and they bowed their heads before the altar in the new chapel. Ethel, now an elder sister, asked who had sent them. Their leader replied, "A warrior who once took your peace, but found none himself afterward. He sends this offering to your God, asking for the peace he could not find." They laid a wooden cross before her. It was rough-hewn, carved by a hand clearly untrained in the craft, yet filled with a raw, desperate sincerity. Ethel took the simple wooden cross and placed it on the altar, right beside the magnificent gilded one that had survived the raid. She whispered a prayer. Redemption grows where mercy is planted. Many years later, when Sister Ethel herself became the abbess of Lindisfarne, she would gather the young novices around her. She would tell them the story not as a warning, but as a lesson. "Do not fear destruction," she would say. "Fear forgetting. What we lost in the fire, we found again in the spirit. The storm that broke our walls was the very thing that built our hearts anew. And when the wind howled once more over the northern sea, the bells of Lindisfarne would ring out, clear and strong, not as a warning of danger, but as a song of remembrance. The Viking raid was not the death of faith on that island. It was its fiery, painful, and ultimately triumphant rebirth. The sisters had endured. Their songs had outlasted the swords, and the island that once burned in ruin became a beacon for all, a powerful testament that even in the darkest of nights, the light of belief cannot be extinguished. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more tales of history and the human spirit.